Morning, good morning, good morning. I see we are so happy to have everyone here. Welcome to our next installment of Meet Your Mayor for District 7. I'm Matt Griffith, Community Representative for Office of Mayor Gloria, representing District 7 along with Council Districts 1 and 4 and the BIPOC, Senior, and Public Safety constituency groups. So happy to have you here with us today on a beautiful Saturday where you have the opportunity to meet Mayor Gloria along with Councilmember Campillo. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Councilmember Campillo.
Thanks so much, Matt. Really appreciate you setting up today with Mayor Gloria and all your staff. Thanks everyone for being here. This is our Meet Your Mayor with District 7. People from Linda Vista and Mission Valley all the way to Lake Murray and up to Terrasana. Love you, Mr. Mayor. And so thank you for being here this morning. We've been dealing with some of the most pressing issues of our city: COVID, homelessness, creating new jobs, getting past COVID. In fact, the mayor and I got vaccinated side by side on Thursday. On the first day, we were eligible from Dr. Jen Campbell, our council president, at the Balboa Gym. And it was a sight to behold, but I'll tell you right now, it feels great to be doing our part to help people move past this, stop the spread of the pandemic. And we really encourage everyone here to take that up if they can. It's really a treat for residents of District 7 to have some face time with our mayor to ensure our voices are heard in our government. And we just got the budget released 2 days ago. And so we're now moving into the big part of the year where we're going to be deciding what we need to spend our money on and which issues we have to tackle face on. And we're really grateful that we have money coming in from the federal government so that we can really make sure our core services are protected. And I know we got questions about many of those services coming today. If you're having any issues, you can always reach out to my office. My entire staff is on the call today. And I know that Matt, who is the voice for District 7 in the mayor's office, is also working hard to keep our finger on the pulse to see what we can do to serve District 7 better. We really appreciate the diversity of our district, the fact that it's the biggest one by area in the city of San Diego, the furthest one east to west reach. It's really a pleasure to be here, and we have community members from every single neighborhood here today. Without much further ado, I want to say thank you, Mayor Gloria, for being here to hear the voices of District 7. We really appreciate your leadership on our main issues. And so without further ado, allow me to introduce Mayor Todd Gloria, the mayor of the city of San Diego.
Thank you, Council Member, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving Raul and I a bit of your time this morning to talk about the issues of importance to District 7 and the city as a whole. I have to tell you, in the 120, what are we at, maybe 127, 128 days now, I have really just come to be so impressed by Councilmember Campillo and his team. They are representing and serving District 7 extremely well. And that just isn't the Todd Gloria endorsement, that's the Linda and Phil Gloria endorsement, who are proud constituents in District 7. While Matt Griffin does an exceptional job of keeping me posted on what D7 needs, I can tell you that my parents, as well as my brother and his family, who are also D7 residents, keep me well informed about the condition of the roads in Serra Mesa, the parks in Birdland, and some of the other areas that they are known to frequent. And they may, in fact, actually be on this call today too, because they are deeply involved in their community. I want to make sure everyone knows Matt Griffin is your point of contact. So if a lot of folks come to these events looking to talk about individual, very specific concerns, when you have that pothole issue, that streetlight issue, calling the District 7 office, allowing Councilmember Campillo to serve you is probably your best bet. Your second best bet is contacting Mr. Griffin from my team, who does a great job. I'm so amazed at the amount of energy that Matt puts into his work. You all are the beneficiaries. Between the two offices, mine and Raul's, we should hopefully be able to take care of some of those issues. What I want to do this morning is power through a couple of key things that's going on at the city, just kind of in the educational part of Raul and I's job, making sure you have information, data to let you know kind of what's going on in the world. And then we have some great D7 community leaders that have some questions from their neighborhoods that we want to get to, and then some questions that from the floor. So I do have a lot of us have been dealing with loss during COVID. A dear friend of mine passed away about a month and a half ago to his services at noon today. So I'm going to be a little tardy to his service, but we're going to have to be a little efficient with this dialogue this morning. So with that, let me be brief, and apologies in advance. I'm often criticized for talking too fast. I would humbly suggest maybe you should listen faster, but maybe we can meet in the middle and make sure that get enough information out so that you know what's going on at the city. And then of course, plenty of time for me to hear what's on your mind. Quickly, in terms of the update, no more important task right now than our response to COVID-19. As the council member mentioned, he and I both vaccinated on Thursday, the first day that he and I were eligible to do it. We went down to our city's municipal gym in Balboa Park, where our firefighters and other city employees have now provided over 66,000 vaccines. And that's really remarkable. I'm really proud of our firefighters, lifeguards, paramedics, and others, over 250 of them who are authorized to give the vaccine, in addition to our council president, and as well as many other city employees are making that system work. We are in assistive posture to the county. The county has a public health department. They're the lead on COVID response, but the city has resources. We have professionals, and we're trying to fill in gaps where they exist. So that is constituted having the center in Balboa Park, pop-up events in some of the zip codes in our city where infections are elevated. A lot of D7 is about average in terms of infection rates, but we have parts in our eastern and southern parts of our city that are 3- and 4-fold higher. And by concentrating our vaccine efforts in those communities, it brings our collective numbers down in terms of infections, our vaccination rate up. And that's what allowed our economy to slowly reopen. Many of you know we're in the orange tier currently. We're on track at this point to reopen our economy fully on June the 15th. Just this past Monday, San Diego Unified, the school district that services District 7, partially reopened for in-person learning. These are all iterative steps towards getting back to some level of normalcy, recognizing that we'll never be quite the same after this experience. But nevertheless, I want you to know the city is working hard to be responsive to that effort. That said, we of course are been impacted like everyone. I would point out that we are other areas of trying to respond is our housing stability assistance program. Councilmember Campillo and I were in Linda Vista a couple of weeks ago to promote that particular program. This is our rent relief fund. It has over $80 million in state and federal funds that we are making available to city residents who are behind on their rent and their utilities. This is also a way for landlords who may be having rents who are not paying, be able to work with their tenants to try and extinguish that back rent. This is pretty critical for making sure that folks don't end up homeless, folks don't end up losing properties in foreclosure. Those dollars are administered by our city's housing commission. So if you are behind on your rent, someone in your family or friend group, in your community or in your neighborhood, please do Raul and I a favor. Make sure they know about this particular fund. Go to sdhc.org. That's our city's housing commission's website. You'll find it right there on the homepage. You can check your eligibility and you can apply online. I'll be candid, right now, our number of applications are below my expectations. That may be that it's going to take people a little bit of time to pull together the paperwork, but we really want to get the word out. We know people are suffering. They had job loss, they had income loss, that as a consequence, they can't make their bills. This is one way to try and address that. And we're anticipating some additional funding for that particular fund via the federal government in the weeks ahead. So let's make sure we let folks know about our Housing Stability Assistance Fund. Again, sdhc.org. Our budget. Many of you have been impacted by the pandemic, your personal family budget. The city is no different. As Raul mentioned, I introduced my first mayor's budget proposal this past week. We're calling it a back to work budget. The idea is trying to make sure that the city's limited resources can be targeted to help restart our economy. We first have to defeat COVID, but then we have to restart our economy and get people back to work, get businesses reopened. This budget is radically different than the one I would have had to propose without the American Rescue Plan. This is President Biden's federal relief proposal that was passed back in the wintertime. This provided the city with $300 million in relief funding. These are dollars that we can now use to fill in the massive budget deficit that has opened up because of the pandemic, as well as address our structural budget deficit that has long challenged our city. What do I mean by that? Well, the city has long spent more than we've taken in. Before the pandemic, the city was projecting a roughly $70 million budget deficit without the economic losses of the pandemic. With the economic losses of the pandemic, we had a mid-year budget hole open up of over $80 million in our current year budget, and over $150 million hole projected for next year, and about $100 million hole for the year after that. When you add up all those numbers, you recognize that what the American Rescue Plan is providing us basically allows us to tread water, which is so helpful. Those firefighters I mentioned to you before who've been going out and vaccinating people in some of our hard hit zip codes, they're even on their mobile units traveling to homes, senior citizen homes, assisted living homes, and personal residences to provide vaccines. Without the American Rescue Plan, we would have had to have asked those very same people who've been true heroes during this process to either take a pay cut or take a pink slip. And the fact that we don't have to do that is all credit due to our president and to Congress. Next time you see Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs or Congressman Peters, I would encourage you to thank them for their votes in support of this. Again, the budget we would have proposed would have been radically different than the one that we have. What are we doing with the budget that we are proposing? Well, again, we're making a major investment in small businesses, over $10 million in funding to help provide forgivable loans to these small businesses to survive the pandemic. The city's been doing a bit of that in the last fiscal year. This is dramatically larger than what they were able to do last time. We are also prioritizing homelessness, recognizing that this continues to be a major challenge in the city. And so a significant amount of the Biden funds are going to that. We are making commitments to youth and families by recognizing that there's been a significant amount of learning loss because of the closure of schools. We want to have our rec centers open as much as possible with robust programming in order to make sure that our kids are occupied, particularly during the summer months. I do have some concerns about what our summer will look like. Some of you have seen in the news a lot of violence and uptick in shootings in our city. That is during the colder weather months. That may get worse in the summer months. And so this is a part of a strategy of trying to address both crime prevention as well as investing in our kids who really need us right now. And then there's also a major investment in climate action. The city has long been a leader when it comes to climate change and trying to prevent it. This budget will help finance our Climate Action Plan 2.0, help us start our our Community Choice Energy Program, which is where we will go to 100% renewable energy, as well as a first of a mobility action plan. Many of you may know that over 40% of our emissions in the city come from our transportation moving around the city. This will be an effort to try and map those emissions and try and reduce them significantly. Two more quick things that I want to touch upon because I think they're both important to District 7 is to go a little deeper on the homelessness issue and on the climate/energy issue. With regard to homelessness, we are trying to change the status quo when it comes to homelessness. Those additional dollars I mentioned are important, but it's also important that we realign our services to match national best practices. I'll give you an example. The previous administration famously bought an indoor skydiving facility down in East Village without an appraisal for a homeless navigation center that doesn't house anybody. So for all of you who are frustrated by the fact that our problem seems to be getting worse when we're spending more money than we ever have, I think you can understand that when we're buying $7 million buildings that don't house anybody, you kind of get why we can spend a lot of money but not see the progress. Raul and I are trying to take a different approach. And this is the opposite of the shiny object. Hey, that's a building. Let's go have a ribbon cutting and a photo op. What we're doing instead is investing in the things that aren't particularly sexy or even tangible, but actually make a difference. And what do I mean by that? Well, we, with the council member support, started the first ever citywide homeless outreach effort that is not led by our law enforcement. This is citywide in scope, so it includes District 7, and it means that we have social worker and trained professionals that are run by PATH, which is People Assisting the Homeless. It's a longtime nonprofit that the city has worked with. These are fanning out across the city, all council districts, to try and make contact with these homeless individuals and persuade them to come off the streets. This is a very different approach. It's a very quiet approach because it's human-centered and one-on-one. There's no ribbon cutting for that particular effort, but it is what other cities are doing to solve their problem, and it's what we're now doing here in the city. Beyond that, we're going to, in this budget, propose investing in more detoxification beds, more behavioral health unit beds. We know that many of our homeless are suffering from mental illness and substance abuse addiction, and we need to make sure that we're investing in having the beds that are able to serve those individuals. There's a lot more behind it, but I want you to hear a desire to have a change in the status quo that is more focused on compassion and on results. Asking our law enforcement officers to continually respond to homelessness is a very expensive way to handle this issue. It is one of the least effective ways, despite the best efforts. They try and do their very best, but at the end of the day, they're about catching bad guys and stopping crime. These are often asking them to do the work of social workers, and this citywide outreach effort is intended to change that. So watch for more on that, recognizing that what we're doing, again, won't grab a lot of big headlines, but I don't want you to judge us by the headlines. I want you to judge us by whether or not we're getting more people off the streets and keeping them off the streets long term. Second and last issue I want to just visit with you, and then we'll toss it back to Matt for the Q&A, is around climate action. I recognize that a good portion of D7 is fairly well inland, which say it's hotter than where I'm in Mission Hills right now. You use your energy a whole lot to kind of cool your homes in the wintertime. And as a result, a lot of you have been extremely interested in the future of energy in the city, specifically our invitation to bid on our energy franchise. Many of you know that we've had a franchise provider for over 100 years. Their current franchise agreement ended back in December. The previous administration was not successful in negotiating a continuation or a new provider. We issued a new invitation to bid for the right to provide both electricity and gas services to the city. That process closed yesterday. We received a bidder, which is SDG&E, our incumbent utility. And so what will happen now is, assuming that their bid is responsive, which is something that we have to review. These are not small documents. These are very lengthy documents. My team and I will be reviewing these documents to make sure it's responsive. And to the extent that it is, we'll start the process of negotiating around what we want that future to look like, deciding whether or not we want to continue with that provider or if we want to try another solicitation. My commitment to you is that we want an energy provider that is completely committed to our climate action plan goals of moving to 100% renewable energy, reducing our emissions and trying to save our climate. I want a provider who is going to be a city partner when it comes to infrastructure projects, particularly undergrounding. I know this is a concern in District 7. I know my parents want to see the utilities and that go along the side of their house undergrounded like yesterday. And to the extent our undergrounding operation is a partnership between our franchisee and the city, we need to make sure that we have maximum cooperation and maximum haste, right? I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty impatient. And when you see the numbers that say your house can't be undergrounded until 2155 or something, there's no real number that's that far out, but you get my point. It's frustrating, it's deflating, and it makes you really angry when you pay that bill every month, knowing that your utilities aren't underground anytime soon. We're going to negotiate over all this stuff and hopefully get a better deal for the city. And that process will play out over the next number of months. I encourage you to watch that process closely. I've told you everything that's on my mind. Now I'd love to hear what's on your mind. Matt, can I toss it to you so we can run through those questions? And again, thank you all for being here today. I know Councilmember Campillo and I both appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mayor. And this time I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first panelist, Rosalie Walker. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know what part of District 7 you reside in. And go ahead and ask your question to the mayor as well. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Rosalie Walker. Yes, I live in Linda Vista, and I've been a longtime resident of Linda Vista, as of my family and for generations. You've addressed my question quite a bit, but I'll ask it anyway. In the past year, there has been a visible uptick in homelessness, also here in Linda Vista, and the issues that accompany the homelessness are endless. What things that you haven't covered are you doing to mitigate the extreme poverty using any of our new resources that have become available?
Mr. Walker, I appreciate you asking that question because there's a lot going on in the space. And it reminds me that this is an important issue, right? It's striking to me, and I know, Raul, if this is your experience, pandemic, recession, people still ask me about homelessness more than anything, which is pretty telling, right, of how much we need to make this a priority and why it's reflected in our city's, in my proposed budget. Beyond the things that I've mentioned before of the citywide outreach efforts, I would say that we're trying to follow national best practices. What that means is a process called Housing First. The idea being that we want to rapidly get people off the streets and then address the causes of their homelessness, as opposed to what has often been the opposite approach of telling someone to get clean and sober before they're allowed to have a shelter bed. That is a process for leaving a lot of really sick people out on the streets. It is somewhat controversial, but I think it's difficult to ask our children to observe someone in active substance use on our sidewalks when we could house them and keep them from relying on our emergency rooms, criminal justice system, et cetera. I've currently engaged President Obama's homelessness czar to help review the city's practices. He'll be issuing his report in a couple of days, and I'll make that, of course, known to the public. Mr. Walker, I can tell you the first thing, just a preview of that plan, and this sort of is indicative of what I was saying before about spending a lot of money but not seeing the results. You yourself said a visible uptick. I'll tell you the data that the city has says the numbers are going down, but nobody believes that, right? And so the problem, one of the things that he's identified is that a lot of city departments interact on homelessness, but they're not coordinated in their operations. So you have police, fire, environmental services, our lifeguards, our parks department. Everyone's working on this, but they don't ever get around the table to try and coordinate their efforts to get better outcomes. This is one of the recommendations he's making that we will implement. We're trying to have an interagency council on homelessness so that the city internally is actually handling this issue better. We need more cooperation with the county and with the state and the federal government. But if we don't have our own house in order, how can we possibly engage better with other organizations to get more progress? I'll tell you a couple other quick things just in terms of preview. District 7 recently accepted a permanent supportive housing complex in Mission Valley. It's one of the hotels that were purchased by the city and converted for formerly homeless individuals. That was a $30+ million grant from the city last year. I'm sorry, from the state last year. We anticipate Governor Newsom to provide a significantly more money this coming year to the city to purchase more hotels for conversion into homeless housing. So I think that it is possible in the very short term to have a lot more units and beds to work with. And ultimately, that's the quickest way to solving homelessness, is to provide people housing. I acknowledge, though, that there are really no simple solutions to this. Every person's path to homelessness is different. And so we have to have an ecosystem built that can allow whoever enters the system to be able to be rapidly housed and not return to the streets. I can't say that's what we have right now, but our goal, again, engaging with Matthew Doherty, who is President Obama's homelessness advisor, will get us closer to that effort.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And next, I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Denise Newell, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself and ask her question to the council member.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello, Councilmember Campillo and Mayor Gloria. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Denise Newell, and I'm a resident of Del Cerro. I'm also a mom and the founder of the Del Cerro Parents Group. And this message is for Councilman Campillo. What are the future plans regarding short-term rentals and enforcement in residential neighborhoods?
Thank you, Denise. I really appreciate you being here today and for always standing up for what Del Cerro needs. When it comes to the short-term vacation rentals, recently we just passed as a council, and Mayor Gloria just signed the long-awaited ordinance to regulate short-term vacation rentals. And while we know that the vast majority of these are along the coast, I also know from the neighborhoods, especially in the east part of our district, there's a handful of these houses, but they seem to be particularly troublesome when they are out in these suburban neighborhoods. So we want to see them regulated. The first thing about this regulation is that it's going to require a cap of 1% of total housing stock everywhere outside of Mission Beach planning area. So that, and that was part of a compromise with the short-term vacation rental companies and advocates. So they're giving up a lot of their opportunities to actually rent out these houses. And that cap is for whole home rentals. If you still just rent out one bedroom, there's no cap on that. You still have to get a permit, but there's no cap on that. But if it's a whole home rental, the ones that tend to be big bachelor parties, big problem issues, those are going to be capped. The second thing is the enforcement. So these permits, and the permit fee is being determined right now by Mayor Gloria's staff as we roll these regulations out, is going to go towards code enforcement. One of the biggest issues was code enforcement didn't have resources to go out when there was a problem. So now we're going to have that money to really have code enforcement go out. The other thing too is that each whole home rental is going to have the contact information of the host on the front window or front door, so that if there is a problem, you have a place to go find that phone number and call the host. And the host has to operate, I believe it's within 2 hours, to make sure that their guest is being a good guest. And one of the other things that I'm really proud of is that I made the amendment to the ordinance that said we're going to prioritize permits to good actors, which means people who don't have a long list of complaints against them. Because if you don't live in San Diego and you own a short-term vacation whole home rental and you don't care what your guests do, well, you're not going to be responsive to that. And we don't want those people who don't live here and don't care about San Diego to be rewarded with a permit. So the people who've been paying their TOT, their tourism tax from that, and the people who have been doing their part and don't have complaints, they're going to be prioritized. All of that is coming up in around October. The mayor's office is working really diligently to make sure those regulations are well thought out and well designed, and it's going to come back to council. The permit fee issue in particular, I believe, has to be voted again on by the council. And then July 2022 is when everything gets set and the paradigm starts. And so really what I want everyone to know is we emphasized good neighbor policy. We emphasized code compliance, and we emphasize good actors over bad actors. And that way we can really start to control it. And when we see after a few years what works and what doesn't, we can adjust a little bit here, a little bit there, and see what we need to do. And I really just appreciate the mayor championing this. He promised he was going to do it in the first 100 days in office. And sure enough, we got it on the docket. We've had our vote on it, and he signed the bill just the other day.
Thank you, Councilmember. And next, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next panelist, Fong Vu.
Hi, thank you very much, Mayor and Councilmember, for allowing us to participate in this. My name is Fong Vu, and I live in Tier Santa, and I grew up here in middle school and high school, so I'm a local kid here. And this question is for the mayor. So Mayor, the disturbing increases in racism and violence against Asians in the United States and California, it's truly kind of gotten our families a little heightened, maybe a little frightened. Thank you for taking the issue seriously, because you asked for public input to combat anti-Asian violence during your March Human Relations Commission meeting. And mainly, I just want to know, can you just provide some of your plans or some of your findings from that to tackle this problem?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to. And by the way, like your shirt, go Padres, right? Yeah, this is very serious stuff. And I can imagine for your family, for your children, for others in your community, we know that it's concerning. I'll forgive folks for not knowing, but I'm a quarter Filipino myself, so this is a personal concern. And we're working on this in a couple of ways. Our Human Relations Commission is trying to endeavor to consider this issue and try and make some recommendations to the council and myself on what more we can do as a city. I have a mayor's API advisory board, which is also advocating internally to my office to make recommendations on what we can do to address the very personal nature of this fear, right, that's out there. While we consider those sort of more macro level areas, what we have been doing in the meantime is the San Diego Police Department has been doing business walks in communities like City Heights, Convoy District, Mira Mesa, informing business owners there of their rights, of how they can go about reporting crimes. We want to know about anything that happens. I'll tell you that when we look at the data is low. But I don't believe it's low because nothing's happening. I believe it's low because people are either afraid, ashamed, or don't know how to come forward. And so one of the things, again, that our Human Relations Commission is doing, as well as the advisory board, is to try and identify ways to make that process easier. The city attorney, Maura Elliott, and I recently hosted a town hall meeting on hate crimes to solicit public input on how to ease that process. A lot of these things are hate incidents as opposed to hate crimes. They may be a slur or intimidation, but not necessarily, an assault that is hate driven. But we want to know about both, because often folks who do hate motivated incidences graduate to hate crimes. And of course, we want to identify those people before it gets there. So there's a lot going on here. And what we have to do is continue to educate the community, reform processes that have been long in place. I think what we had really at this point in time is really a monolingual approach. And when you're talking about communities that are very diverse, we need to make sure that we can report in different languages, that we have online capability for we'll be able to report that stuff, that we educate people how to report, what information we need. That town hall I mentioned a moment ago, we had some people with some really chilling stories, but as victims of crimes, they weren't able to necessarily provide the information that we need to follow up. And it's understandable, but we can help take particular steps to make us all be better at getting to this. I just would wrap up by saying, I think it's really important, and I know Councilmember Campillo feels the same way, for you to hear from people in positions like his and mine, that this is unacceptable, that we will not stand for this, and that to the extent that this happens in our city, we will work swiftly, we will hold people accountable, and we will spare no expense for finding this. You may know that there was a series of vandalism incidents in Hillcrest directed at both the Black and the LGBTQ community. what we were able to do in response was to bring myself, the council member, the council president, the city attorney, the police chief. We went out, had a press conference in front of one of the businesses. We actually gained more evidence in that case, and we're actively hunting down that individual, again, to hold them accountable. That's the kind of aggressive approach that we want to have in the city. But again, I'm interested in trying to address some of the systemic concerns around it. And again, the Human Relations Commission and our advisory board are places where if you or others you know have inputs or recommendations, I would encourage you to interface with those groups to make sure that we're acting upon them and hopefully making them a part of our city's ongoing policies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And lastly, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our last panelist, Shannon Mazzarelli.
Hello, thank you both. Thank you for hosting and for taking the time, and to Councilmember Campillo, thank you and your office for just having such great proactive involvement and communication with District 7. It's been refreshing, so thank you. My name is Shannon Mazzarelli. I reside in Serra Mesa. I've only been here since 2006. I married into one of those long-term Serra Mesa families. My husband's been here since, since he was born in the 70s. So we reside here, we go to school here, we love the community, so it's been great. I also co-run the Serra Mesa Mamas Social Club. It's just a group of about 500 area moms that get together to socialize, not all at once, but especially now. But my question is for you, Councilmember Campillo. Just, and with regards to District 7, how will the city prioritize our infrastructure needs and be able to stay within budget?
Absolutely. The infrastructure of our city is long overdue for upgrades, and the IBA's report, the Department of Finance's report that works for Mayor Gloria have shown us that we're billions behind in terms of renovations we need to do, and there's a significant funding gap there. What I'm happy to say is that in this upcoming budget, we're seeing significant dedication of funds to be spent on repaving roads, resurfacing roads. The mayor's policy is the Sexy Streets Initiative, and we're seeing an increase in $10 million directly from the general fund, plus an additional $30 million in commercial paper, which is essentially short-term funding, short-term loans for that sort of funding. And so we're not turning a blind eye to the fact that people want not just better roads for their cars and their tires and the efficiency, but the fact that their kids play in those roads, ride their bikes and their skateboards and their rollerblades and go running on that. And that includes not just the road itself, but the sidewalks as well. Believe me, the number of times we see cases that we have to settle as the city council with individuals who've fallen on a sidewalk and sue the city, it's enormous. And so we're going to actually be saving money by investing in those things in this upcoming budget. Another thing is there's a project that we've had as a city for a long time called Vision Zero. In essence, it's putting the infrastructure investments that reduce car accidents, bicycle accidents related to pedestrians that end up killing a lot of people. And so, I mean, I have the budget right in front of me. Mr. Mayor, my staff and I have been flagging lots of different pages so that we can talk about them in upcoming weeks. But we're seeing $18.2 million invested in things like bicycle facilities, median installation, new walkways, traffic signals that work better and sometimes just work to begin with, and lots of streetlight improvements too. So we're looking at investing in that. Part of it is a balance of where do you shift it in from the other parts of the budget. Sometimes it's commercial paper loans, and right now is a good time to borrow because the rates are so low. In fact, one of the things that we voted on several times at council is refinancing along a lot of our long-term loans, and we're actually saving lots and lots of money by doing that. And so the Department of Finance really has a lot of good leadership under Mayor Gloria to do that. The last thing I'd say is we're spending a lot more money on the Pure Water project coming up right now, hundreds of millions of dollars, so that we can have long-term sustainability and reuse of a better source of potable water, because we know that more droughts are about to come. So we're investing in that right now. That pipeline obviously takes a long time to build, but it's coming up too. And then there's one little other detail I noticed too. There's the general fund, but then there's also the capital improvements that we do. And there's what's called the enterprise funds, which is a lot of infrastructure projects. What we're seeing right now in the proposed budget from a few days ago is over 90 FTE going into the enterprise funds, because we need more people to be able to process those permits and go out and survey and all these sorts of things that are about safe infrastructure in our city. the mayor's proposed increasing the number of full-time employee hours going towards that. So I know he's taking it very seriously. He's the council member for District 3 for 8 years before going to the state assembly. He knows all the problems in and out here in San Diego. District 7 has them too. And one of the big issues we heard at our 8 town halls for each of the neighborhoods in District 7 was, when are you going to fix the pipes and the roads? It's coming up, it's coming soon, and the mayor's budget proposal has that. I know I'm going to definitely support those infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Councilmember. And this time, I would like to go into some of our pre-submitted questions. These questions came from various residents throughout District 7. Mayor Gloria, this question is actually going to be for you first. This is from Carl Fields. His question is, when will the recreation centers and the swimming pools reopen?
Thank you, Mr. Fields. So easier to do the swimming pools. So the pools are now open except for 3 in our city. The pool in Balboa Park, Bud Kearns, City Heights, which are both under construction. And then the Tirsana pool, which is probably why Mr. Fields is asking, is currently awaiting some parts for repair. This gets back to Shannon's question about infrastructure. I choose to call it sexy because people like to say infrastructure isn't sexy, but this stuff is, if you say it's not sexy, you don't prioritize it, right? You don't put money toward it. And we need to put a lot more money toward infrastructure. So if we're going to call it sexy, let's put some more money toward it. And that, it's not sexy stuff like repairs for pools, but when pools aren't open because the infrastructure is failing, you understand why we need to prioritize pool repair. The rest of our pools are currently open, and that's going on. Rec centers is a work in progress. I have been receiving information from our healthcare advisors at the city of a potential for additional spike in COVID cases. And as a result, I've been leery about reopening our facilities only to have to shut them back down again. We actually now, this week's update, I get weekly updates, was the first time that they have taken back that concern and feel as though we have pretty clear sailing going forward. So right now we have to, call back staff, figure out plans for reopening in order to follow the public health order, and meet and confer with our employee unit. So my best guess at this point is sometime in late May. I'd like to do it sooner than that, but we need to make sure that what we do there is aligned with public health protocols. And as you heard me say in our budget proposal, I'm looking to do some pretty significant investments in rec centers for the summer. Again, acknowledging that there's some real concerns about activating and occupying our youth. So we have been without for a while, but I think we're going to go from a period of scarcity to a period of abundance here pretty soon. So appreciate y'all's patience while we got through this.
Thank you, Mayor Gloria. And our next pre-submitted question, this will be for you, Councilmember Campillo. This is coming from Emmeline Lepard. Her question is, I'm a retired teacher and I'm interested in hearing more about community gardens throughout San Diego and community health and wellness initiatives, in addition to programs working for or with youth post-COVID-19.
That's a really important question. And Emmeline, you're a retired teacher. I wouldn't say I was retired. I was only a teacher for a few years, but I really appreciate your career of service to our children here. Let's get into really quickly the community gardens. And I think I see my good friend Amy Zink from Linda Vista on the call too. Look, we're emphasizing community gardens in my office. We want to see more community gardens. My staff and I have been working to get commitments from different outside groups to help build some of these community gardens. And I have a commitment from the Carpenters Local 619 union, and they're going to be out to help and build the Linda Vista community garden that will hopefully be going in soon next to the skate park on some open land. We got to get some of those permits still got to go. There's still some plans to go, but I'm trying to find people who will contribute their time and resources to help us do this as inexpensively as possible and to get it done as quickly as possible. My staff and I also toured the community garden behind Gethsemane Lutheran Church in Serra Mesa and saw just how amazing that is, and the fact that we need to be able to put more resources into that, partly because it's sustainability, and it's community building. It provides a really great outlet for everyone from youth to senior citizens to come together and share in a community project. But also a lot of those gardens are going to feed people who have food insecurity right now. So I really appreciate everyone who has a micro farm, a micro garden in their backyard and have been providing to like the Bayside Community Center for their Wednesday food distributions. The last thing I'd say here about you're working for and with youth post-COVID. In this upcoming budget, because of Mayor Gloria's leadership and because the council have submitted our budget priorities several months ago about what we wanted to see for youth, we're looking at things like the library summer camp is going to have almost $500,000 for it. The Summer Youth Environmental Recreation Corps program is getting $250,000. And Summer Youth Recreation Programming has about $400,000 in the proposal right now. So we're seeing a lot of collaboration between the mayor's office and the council districts that said, hey, we got to invest in children because a dollar invested early is better than a dollar to fix something later. And so we were really, it's a new day in San Diego and how we approach, how we solve problems before they start, but also I think we just want to see our kids have great opportunities coming out of COVID, spending a year in home. I'm really happy to see my council colleagues and Mayor Gloria see eye to eye on this and provide them with opportunities as the summer opens up. We're going to see some really great programs here in the city of San Diego for the youth.
Thank you, Councilmember Campillo. And in the interest of time, I'm going to ask a question from the chat. This is going to be coming from Chris Roseman. It's going to be directed to both of you, so go ahead and please answer. And also provide your closing remarks as well, given that we will be needing to make sure that both can attend. So Chris Roseman asked, if the solution to homelessness is homes, what is being done to encourage housing development at all levels, from affordable housing to market rate single family, duplex, and multifamily, et cetera?
Do you want to go first, Councilmember?
Sure. So one of the big things about incentivizing housing is state laws provide for what's called a density bonus along transit. And two of the biggest supporters of expanding our transit system, both bus line and rail and all sorts of things, are me and Mayor Gloria and our leadership on the SANDAG Regional Planning Board. And so when you open up those opportunities, developers can then build more units in a particular spot, which allows them to get their return on investment. I'd say the other thing too is working through that San Diego Housing Commission, we actually put a lot of money in sort of what's called gap funding, because it is difficult to make projects pencil out when resources are scarce and land is just very expensive all through California and especially in San Diego. And so the Housing Commission, which is really an arm of the San Diego city government, puts in that extra loan money at low rate loans so that developers can build stuff. And then they have to put in things like units that are dedicated at low rents, like what's called the AMI is the area median income. We make sure that people who aren't making $90,000 a year for a family four, if you make 60%, that's closer to $60,000, can still afford to have that. And going into the future, we're going to be trying to figure out ways for home ownership for people who don't make really high incomes. That's also a long-term goal of ours.
I associate myself with everything Mr. Campillo said, and I would just add a couple things. One is that housing is infrastructure too, right? I mean, what do we have communities for if people can't live there, right? And the fact that we have so many unsheltered folks really show that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to building housing. And I would say that Raul's points in the concern of the question around homelessness is fair, but I liked his points about trying to take the next step, because really, with the exception of folks who have the luxury ability to afford the luxury housing that's getting built kind of all over the place, I'm concerned a lot with our unsheltered population, our low income, but also our working and middle class San Diegans who frankly don't earn enough to afford the luxury stuff that's built in this city, but also earn too much for the programs the city has to offer, things like Section 8 and public housing, et cetera. Don't get me wrong, we need housing at all price points. I think that if you think of housing as a ladder, you need to be able to climb the housing rungs, and we don't have a lot of rungs in the middle for working and middle class families. And as mayor, I don't think we can be a great city if we don't have a thriving working and middle class. So my parents were maid and a gardener. They were able to work extremely hard, buy a home in Serra Mesa. Shannon, like you, back in the day, a little harder for those of us these days, but they were able to do that with working class blue collar backgrounds. And I know that their story is nearly impossible today. What Raul and I must do, working with our state and federal partners, is to make it easier to build housing, make sure that as much as possible that housing is concentrated at the low and middle income ends of the market. And we can do that with some of our policies at the city. We can do that by advocating for legislation at the state level. We can do it by advocating for the infrastructure funding that President Biden is suggesting, which I hope to be extremely competitive for should those dollars get enacted. So it is a multi-pronged policy challenge, but I appreciate the question being asked, because I think often the loudest voices on the issue of housing are ones that believe that new housing harms communities. I can attest from my own experiences as a council member, housing can actually help make a community better, assuming that it blends in well and is priced well and has the amenities and the infrastructure that's necessary. Our goal is to make sure that we're doing that. I want to make sure that Shannon's kids can afford to live in San Diego and Sierra Mesa. We have to do that if we want to be a great city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I just want to say again, thank you so much, Councilmember Campillo, for taking time and providing us an update for District 7. Mayor Gloria, thank you as well for taking time to provide an update from the city. At this time, we'll be concluding our Meet Your Mayor. As you can see here, we have all District 7 staff contact information available along with myself and Mayor Gloria. So again, if your question was not asked or answered today, please feel free to follow up with myself or District 7 staff as we want to continue to make this city a city for all of us. We hope that you guys have a safe and productive weekend. We thank you so much for taking your time out to be with us today. And again, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Councilmember.
everyone.
Keep up the great work.
You too. We'll see you soon.